What's up, y'all? This is Christ Culture, the podcast. I'm Kiana,
I'm Calvin.
and we're doing our roundtable of the Christ Culture crew. And today we're talking about another topic from our viewers.
Yeah, let's go to the magic list and see what we got going on.
Let's look at it.
Before we do that, please look at me.
All right, go to
Here we
you.
go.
Until they get this, I'm gonna keep on saying it. Spherical room talk.
He does not like the idea of a round table.
I feel like a spherical room.
This little table it's not
round,
round,
though.
but
I feel
it's
like a
round.
spherical room that was like a dome. Yeah, have you seen those dome houses? They look like the Teletubby houses. Y'all know Teletubbies?
All right.
Spherical room.
Mirror, mirror on the
Show
wall.
me,
What
show
are we
me.
talking about today? We are talking about long distance relationships. How do we feel about it?
Don't do it.
Have you ever been in one?
Yeah, I was about to say, has anybody ever been in a long distance relationship?
This
I have.
2 hours from Northern Virginia to Southern Virginia.
Southern Virginia.
Never been.
Yeah.
Long distance. I've had the opportunity to be in one, and I panicked and was like, "Nah, this just not. It's not gonna work. Not more so for. Not. So it's not more so I didn't think it was gonna work. Like I thought we could have did it, but I thought for her like it would be too much, especially because I was gonna be a college athlete, and once you become a college athlete, your schedule gets crazy, especially that summer. You go into camp, like literally, like you wake up at 4 o'clock, you practice, you weightlift, you got to take a nap, and you're still taking classes. People forget that when we're in camp, we're usually taking classes or have started classes already. So people think we're just practicing. No, we're doing that, right? So I might not see your messages. We might not have the phone calls that we need to have. The distance can play a very hard factor because you're not getting the same love that you were receiving when we were closer, right? And you're in Kent State or California State or Washington State, and I'm in Norfolk State, Old Dominion, whatever. Like, it's gonna play a hard toll, and the relationship just it's hard to work out.
Yeah.
Oh,
I've
glitch.
I guess I've been in a long distance relationship. But I really don't consider it a relationship for real. It was like 5 months, I think, and it was all online, or not online, but it was all electronic. So that's why I think it's I think truthfully, I think it like you said, it's just difficult because it's you literally can't tell who a person is through a screen. Like you can't, whether it's FaceTime, like texting, calling, like whatever it is, you can't read that person. You can't see them physically and you can't feel their energy, you can't feel that vibe that you guys can that connection is very something you have to experience and feel. And I feel like you can't really get that through a screen.
So are you gonna say something?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I've never technically done a long distance relationship. I mean, I was probably in high school when I was dating my boyfriend at the time, who went away for college while I was still in high school. So that was kind of long distance because I didn't really drive like that yet. But well, I wasn't like that young either. I was like a junior. But I feel like that's valid if you met online and like that's how the foundation of the relationship started online, where a long distance relationship just wouldn't make sense necessarily. People do it all the time. I don't understand it, but if it works for them, then it does. But like, I feel like if you know the person and have been dating for a while, where you know each other, where it's like, dang, your soul feels a little different today. What's going on? Where like you're able to even check each other emotionally. Then I feel like there's something that might be there, and it all depends on like the circumstance of like, okay, maybe this person's away for 6 months. Let's thug it out because maybe we need to focus on our communication skills that we weren't able to practice when we lived down the street from each other. So there's certain seasons for it, but I definitely think if you're meeting somebody and then it becomes long distance, then I don't think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just want to because like then it gets to like you're talking every day, like you're talking like every hour on the hour, and then your time gets limited. Like I guess that change kind of like diminishes. But like you said, like working on that communication is very important. But I think once you enter into a long distance relationship, you working on communication, it starts to like dwindle. Like you'll start that first few couple of weeks, but like you said, 6 months, right? You'll start that first few couple of weeks, then it'll start to break down, and that's when it starts to get rough and patchy.
I can relate to that because now that I'm thinking about it, I did have a long distance, but it was only for like a 3 month span. But even in that time, yeah, communication. We weren't talking like every hour, but there were times where I'm like, oh, you didn't text me at your normal time. What's going on? You know, like sometimes there leaves room for that doubt of like, are they doing something else they're not being honest with?
Yeah.
That does creep in, but I do think it depends on the type of relationship that you guys have. Like if that communication and trust is there, I think it's doable.
So I'm actually going to take an opposite stand of all of y'all. Because I was in my first long distance relationship in high school, probably like 11th grade through mid freshman year of college. And he was in, he lived in Michigan. I lived in VA. And we met over Tumblr. So we met via social media. And I feel like it's a different form of intimacy because it's just communication. And I don't think I had FaceTime. I probably did have FaceTime, but I don't think he had FaceTime, but that's either here or there. But but it's like a different form of intimacy that I feel like it might take longer to build if you're in a physical relationship because when you start long distance, at least in my situation, I wasn't able to see your whole physical physique. I'm not able to like have physical touch, but it's like that intellectual aspect of the relationship. So, and I feel like, of course, if you keep communication up to par, you'll be good. We were good for the majority of the relationship until college, because y'all know once you go to college and you're in a relationship, sometimes it doesn't work out. But yes.
I'm gonna take this a whole different direction and not talk about a intimate relationship and talk about a long distance relationship with my parent. Um, so I moved here with my father back in like 2008, and my mother still lives in Michigan. So her and I had to have a long distance relationship, and at first that was tough. I was never really a talkative person, so getting into a space where it was like talking to my mom was the only interaction that we had was very different for me. Um, what I will say is a big part of long distance relationships is just finding a way that you connect with that person if you're trying to make it work. So for me and her, it became like our dreams. We love talking about our dreams with one another. So that's how we've kind of sustained that and grown that. So yeah, I would say definitely if you're going to attempt to have a long distance relationship, it's not just talking to that other person. You better have something to talk about. And like even with that, I'm almost like on a schedule with my mom when we talk because I'm like I can't talk to her every day because we're gonna run out of stuff to talk about. So it's like every 2 or 3 days, let some life happen so we actually have conversation to have with one another. Yeah, but it was definitely difficult in the beginning, for sure.
I think that's a big thing, what you just said. I think we've all kind of had our little dabbles in long distance relationships in our lives. I had one and it didn't last long, like a month maybe, just cause like I know me, like I'm not really a good like communicator outside of in person. So when it comes to like talking on the phone, texting like that, I kind of fall off really quick. And so, and then on top of that, we were trying to talk every day, and we quickly ran out of things to talk about because we were just like, you got to talk. We have to talk every day because we don't see each other. And then like, okay, we talked about that today, and over time, it just kind of dwindles out. And so I think long distance is definitely tough, and yeah.
In relation to, or maybe to piggyback on top of this aspect of communication, let's bring the idea of like love language into it. Because if I'm somebody who values quality time or physical touch, or I think those are only like real in-person ones that you could do, like gift giving, or yeah, like I think that has a key role in it too, because if you're two people who are both, you receive and give your love language as words of affirmation, or acts of, no, not even acts of service, maybe that might work. But I just know, like, for people, I know for me, proximity is a big thing. Where I want to be able to hang out, because like love language, my love language is definitely like quality time. Like if I can spend time, but on the flip side of that too, it's like if we can spend quality time and get creative with our digital time that we have together, maybe we're like watching movies on FaceTime, or like, hey, like let me know when you're going out, then I'll kind of like match your vibe or something. There's ways you can get creative with it, but like let's talk about like love languages and that aspect.
Sorry. You know.
Go ahead, I'll go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as I've gotten older, like I've looked at it like, okay, like this is what could have been done. This is what could have been done. Because when you're younger, like you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about proximity. Like, what are they doing when I'm not around, right? Like you don't have control of that. Your intrusive thoughts start getting in control, right? And you're just like, I don't know, like, can I trust this person? But then it's also like you said, physical touch, gift giving, right? I know I'm a goofy spirit, right? And my goofy spirit doesn't work like through digital. I feel it doesn't. Like
Mhm.
I have to be in the same room with you so you can understand. Like you can feel that goofy spirit. Like, and so if you're not getting that anymore, you're gonna find it elsewhere. And then those are like the intrusive thoughts that go through my head. So I'm just like, we might as well not do it. Nope. I'm not. I'm not even trying to mess with it. Right. So that's just.
Let's switch it. Let's switch it up. Can our co-host, talk about being in a long distance relationship with God?
Ooh, love that.
I was in, I was in one of those for quite some time in a long distance relationship with God. Um, and I talked, it was funny. I was actually telling somebody this exact story today, but like I was in a spot in my life where I knew who God was. I said my prayers at night. I prayed over my food. I went to church because I had to, but there was no personal relationship with him. It was very much long distance. There was so much distance between who he actually was and who I saw him as. Um, and it was just like, okay, well, God's there when I need him, but I'm going to live my life over here. So there was a ton of distance between he and I. Um, and the only thing like I'll say to that is once I closed that proximity and I gave myself over to him, the quality of life just increases so much when you're closer to him. So yeah, I've definitely been there in a long distance relationship with God, and it's not the best way to live your life.
I think we all have too. Like that's so real. And I know like even before my faith walk started, like officially, I don't know, like I could call that my long distance relationship with him, because I knew that he was always there. Like I always believed in God. I always believed that, in the Trinity, like Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit. So I knew that it was in me. It's just that like I didn't know what it meant. Like to me it was King James version, and I don't even like to read Shakespeare, and that's what I translated it as. I was like, I don't know what this art thou is. And that's just it's like I couldn't find a way that felt like me, not more so like feelings, but something that I could actually translate and make it tangible and practical. So then I think what started to help my relationship get a little bit more intimate was I started to see ways in my creative life that God related to. Like I started going to this like virtual Bible study group with creatives that were like dancers, artists, musicians, playwrights, and stuff like that. Like it was a Bible study group, and they were talking about like, okay, how does Ephesians 4, how do you relate that to an experience you had in your creative life? And it was like, well, I went on this audition and blah, 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 and so I was like, oh, I've never seen it like that. Okay, I can see that this audition wasn't meant for me because maybe he has something else for me. And so bridging that gap to find my relationship with God was more like, okay, I had this over here, knowing that he was there the whole time, but let me come to that and start to talk to him in a way that we speak. Like we have our own dialect, we have our own conversations. It's not going to sound like anybody else's, but that's how we speak, you know?
I wouldn't say it was a long distance relationship. Like everybody was saying, I feel like I knew God was there. I was having conversations with him, but I did reach a point like early pandemic, right? Where a lot of things happened, right? The passing of my grandmothers, the inability to walk at my graduation, especially after dealing with 4 years of struggle and everything. Like it got to a point where I'm being vulnerable here. Like I was mad at God. I was like, what is going on? Like I did this, like I was praying every day, like we were having conversations. You knew how big of a moment this was for me. Why? And so the prayers would be like it would be, we're still having conversations, but it's like I'm like I have animosity, like so it would be like I'm back again. We're talking again. Like why am I still feeling this pain? Why did you do this to me? Right? And like after talking and talking and talking and talking and just finally getting through everything and realizing that God did this for a reason, and I'm angry at the situation. I'm not angry at him. Um, I started focusing on just rebuilding that relationship.
Yeah.
It wasn't a long relationship because I was still there. I was still talking every day. I was still trying to seek his word in every way because I was trying to understand. But it just went back to a rebuild of our relationship, not so a closing of the distance.
Got a question for everybody. How do you guys think we can utilize our love languages to build a stronger relationship with God? For example, if you have a love language of quality time, how do you spend quality time with God? Words of affirmation. How can you use words of affirmation to get closer to God? Things like that.
I can speak on quality time really quick if I could interject. Because that's my love language. The ways I do it is the ways that it's kind of backwards. It's like what I would want somebody to do for me, then what I would want for me to do for myself. And then I'm like, okay, actually, let me do that for God first. So it's like I like the self dates that I talk about. Like I'll do that and be like, all right, I'm going on a self date, but whole time I'm like with God the whole time. Where I'm like taking this time to meditate. I'm taking my Bible, I'm reading scriptures, and not only just reading it, I'm meditating on it. And I'm like, okay, what did you try to show me here? Because I opened to a random page and I feel that. So like, what is the Holy Spirit saying in me? So doing that, going out to the park or going out on a little smoothie date, or even just like journaling. Journaling is a huge way that I spend time with God. First thing in the morning before I start work, I set aside at least 30 minutes where I'm like, okay, this is literally my scripture time and journal. And this is where I'm like getting right with God before I go out into the world. So that for me is quality time, just shutting the world down and it's just me and him.
Yeah. I think that go ahead. Like the good thing about God is that God speaks all the love languages, and all he wants you to do is choose him. He could really care less like how you do that. Like just choose him, and so like for me personally, I love just like serving, like doing things that serve him in some way. So I guess that's kind of like the love language that I use to serve him. The other thing I was thinking about was like we're talking about long distance relationships with God, and I think something that we should always remember is if the relationship is long distance, it's only long distance for us. He never moves. He never goes anywhere. He never strays from you. He's always there with you. Every time you turn around, he's like right there. So it's only long distance on our side. So he's always there waiting for you to come back. So if you find yourself in that situation, just know you can always come back to him.
One thing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. And I say not with that, not underestimating the tie that it has in the relationship with yourself too, and how that corresponds. Because I feel like there's been times where I felt long distance from God, because I come to God like, you know, in this like down, you know, whatever tough season, but I'm like, but I trust you, you know, and I just come to him like, but you're God, and like, yeah, and like it's like just so happy when I'm not really happy, you know, like feeling happy. So it's just like knowing, coming to yourself and like being real with you so you can be real with God in that relationship and spending time with him and the quality time, not like quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
It's
was
like,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's like truly what the scripture means when it says rejoice in your sufferings.
Yeah.
Like you like, yeah, I'm suffering, but God is still God. Like
Even if
Yeah.
it's a fake, like a fake smile too.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, it doesn't hurt. But no, what I was gonna say. Okay, so like just what you were saying is kind of seeing it like if our relationship with God is a long distance relationship, let's kind of switch that around. Like technically it is because he's not physically right here sitting next to us. So imagine you met the love of your life where you're like, dang, like this is my person. Even not maybe it is your closest like family member or your best friend that you don't ever want to lose in your life. How much more would you invest into that relationship if it had to be long distance? Like you would do anything you could to make it work. So it's like if I know the love languages and more is how I can show that with God, like for me to pour into this relationship, I'm going to do that. So it's like, why don't we should take that posture and treat that relationship with God the same way? It's like,
Right.
even if this was to be on the phone, which is our prayer, right? Like, how are we going to nurture that relationship using our long distance skills?
Absolutely. And like Calvin said, like all, he meets us anywhere where we invite him. So it's like I found that and like there's so many different ways that we can connect with him. Like whether like and what it looks like to me is not gonna be what it looks like to somebody else. Like there are days where, watching TV, I'd be like, dang God, like you're really spitting in this show,
True.
and there are
speaks so
days
many
where I'm like
ways.
cooking and I'm like, God, you're really chefing it up. Like whatever it looks like, just inviting him into that space, he'll be there.
Yeah. It's real.
I think that was a good one, guys.
Yeah, let's wrap up there.
Yeah. Long distance relationships. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation.
As always, drop some comments below so you can add to the conversation. We'll ham it up down there.
Yeah.
And we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.
Ding, ding, ding. Bedtime.
Bedtime.